to item C, approval of the May 24th, 2016 and June 16th, 2016 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve those meeting minutes? First by aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the building report. Director of Buildings and Grounds report.
Very quickly, I was able to get all the data to close the fiscal year, but by the next meeting, we will. At the end of May, we are current, in the month of May, FY16 expenditures were $100,037.60 less than FY15. Total would pay $118,023.72. The next page is the electricity and natural gas analysis. Again, the June electricity data was incomplete, so it could not close the fiscal year. So basically, if anybody has any questions on either one of those reports, I'll be happy to help.
I think it's important to mention to everyone, not only on this committee, but in the audience, that with the fiscal year ending at the end of last month, with bills still rolling in and closing the books and trying to figure some of these numbers out, it does take our finance people a couple of, 2, 3, 4 weeks to get the final numbers and get everything really buttoned up and duly down, start doing the analysis that we do. But
I will say that these numbers are not, you're not going to see the numbers from fiscal year. This
Right.
is to analyze
The
the
usage,
usage,
but usage,
right? So these will go into the month that the expenses incur.
Moving on to number 2, unless there's any questions about the
Rich, I know last time we were trying to run the cogen systems. Did you guys get an estimate? Did that save money, or was that a wash? Or
Right now, we're in the easy stages of gathering that data and putting together. Like before I actually comment too much on that, I would like to have some more data to take a look at. So we'll say that through the generator engine ran the entire month of May and June, and two of them ran sporadically due to some technical and mechanical issues.
The consultant that we have, the pre-consultant, I don't know if we describe the cogen, but Midwest Energy, which is our broker for electric and gas, one of the representatives is a community member, and children go to, so he volunteered, and they're both veteran people. They both advise other, both school districts and private companies on cogen. They're going to come back as well to look at the bills and check to see savings and report to us. And we can do it as well. They're going to do it at no charge. They're going to come back and see how the first couple months have looked.
questions, comments? Appraisals.
Yeah, we were, got direction and authority to get appraisals on all our land, three large parcels and 2 lots. We went to 2 of our attorneys, one of the attorney that works on PCAP cases, tax objection cases, and a lot of appraisals that happen with PCAP cases. And so 2 of our attorneys that we work with have longstanding relationships with appraisers and gave us their recommendation to get quotes from them. So we I think it was five or 6 appraisers that were associated with our attorneys that we asked for quotes. And then Tinley Park in 2013 had an appraisal done of our land at 191st Street. It was the Gorman Group. And so we thought we typically don't do business with that firm, but since they already did the appraisal once for one of our parcels, we thought they would be pretty cost effective, so we invited them to quote. And they did quote, but surprisingly, they were actually the highest of the quotes we received. I thought we might get 1 or 2 more quotes. The deadline was yesterday. Have not heard back, but whenever I try to get quotes compared to bids, I always try to get at least 3. I think if I get 3 quotes, that's marketplace and try to get those best price. So we did get 3 quotes, and one firm did officially decline just because they were too busy at this time. The lowest quote is Appraisal Associates out of downtown Chicago. They've done a lot of business for appraisals, for our attorneys on PTAP cases and other matters. All the companies we asked for quotes were qualified. They're MAI appraisals, so they have the highest level of certification for their appraisals, and we'll be recommending the school board. Are we going to take official action, or we're just going to proceed with it?
I think we'll ask direction.
Ask direction for the board before we engage the firm for that. But see no reason why we shouldn't just go with the lowest price because they're all qualified.
One quick question, the Gorman Group, where in Tinley Park, are they in our district, Tinley Park, or?
I think he personally lives in Tinley Park. His office is East Hazel Press, Illinois, 175th Street.
Okay.
So I talked to him on the phone, I think he said he's.
That's just
I
something
think
I
he's
know
from,
we always,
Tinley Park, but
we
I
always
think his office
try and
is-
give, some priorities to local businesses who pay taxes to our district.
His office address is 175th Street, East Hazel Press. Didn't even know that as a town.
Have you ever dealt with appraisals?
I might have. I've seen so many appraisals in Cook County. When I was administrator in Cook County, I think we might did 15 appraisals a year. There's so many PTAP cases going on, and in Cook County, Cook County doesn't happen as often. So yeah, I've seen so many appraisals over the years. But
John Hinsel has. And he gave us the list of these with the ones I would recommend.
Other questions? Comments? Are you looking for a recommendation in your stuff to take to the board?
I know the group was in agreement last time, we need to get these done. I'm assuming go with the lowest cost, if anybody doesn't want anything different. Just complete it in a timely manner, so we can bring those appraisals back to the board and get a determination of, have the board determine what direction they want to go in terms of marketing these properties, with a bid, so on and so forth. But I think it was the last time we discussed this, it was consensus that we move forward. So
All right, moving on to budget and financial matters. Treasurer's report.
If you don't mind, can we do the resolution offer? It kind of leads into some of
That's
that.
fine, so let's
lead into
so you want to skip to 3 and then do 3, 1, 2? Any objections to the change in the order? No? Let's go ahead and go with the resolution authorizing the preparation of the 2016-27 budgets, and that'll kind of flow into your next. And actually, if Steve, if you could start by introducing maybe the woman to your left, because I don't think we had that opportunity as a.
Two introductions. Kelly Lazo is our new director of finance, and she's going to tell you more about herself here on number 4. But we're certainly happy to have Kelly, and she'll give some of her background when she gives her report. We also have with us at the table Rich Pagliaro. Rich is retired assistant superintendent from Joliet. Rich is going to work with us some in an interim capacity as well, working alongside Steve and Rich Wilkie as we move through our life safety and some of our other issues. We discussed this, the board had discussed this. I'll be bringing his name forward for an as-needed basis moving through this current fiscal year. As we all know, Steve is limited to 100 days and it starts again at the end of September. And so in the interim, we need some help. And Rich also provides experience, a wide wealth of knowledge in terms of building functions. 30-some years in the business. I won't put a year on it, but 46. So we're really happy to have Rich. He came on board and worked a few days with us just to kind of get acclimated, but it's going to help us moving forward. We have this very strong financial team in order. I'm very excited to work with these 3 individuals.
Oh, and the reason I wanted to start this one first is in August and September, we're going to be if you look at the timeline here, we're going to be heavy duty into budget analysis, and also, when we present tentative budgets in August and in September, revised budgets in September, we'll always be showing you last year's budget, last year's actual, and then, tentative budget, proposed budget. So when we look at the financial statements in 2 minutes, the cash flows, certainly ask questions, but I'm hoping that more than anything that if you have, and I think one of our first speakers said, I've created financial statements, and we go over them every month, and I think they serve a purpose. I think they're good. I've used these financial statements for a long time, but that doesn't. And when I present them to the school board as well, I said, here's financial statements, but we'll do whatever you all want. Whatever is meaningful to you, what's important to you. This is a different situation here than previous districts I've worked with. So as we go through the budget process, if you want to email me, my email is slanger@lw210.org. So just email me what you would like to see, and even if you have questions related to the current financial statements and the current cash flows that we at the end of the year, I would appreciate the questions, in an email, and then I could tailor the presentations in August and September to meet your needs and what information that you want. And if I decide, like if you say, I wish you would present this type of information, and if we all decide, we're not going to present it in that fashion, different than you thought you had requested, I'll send you an email why we're not, we're not going to present the information in that way. That we're going to present it in a little bit different way, and the reasons for them. I think we have a lot of time over the next couple months to really delve into the numbers. Does anybody have any questions related to the timeline and why we're going to do a resolution which is new to this district, doing a resolution directing the superintendent and myself to create the budget and meet the legal requirements of legal notices and putting things on public display and holding public hearings and such.
I would like to change one time in the resolution down at the bottom. Instead of 5:30, let's move that back to 6:30. And then we would tentatively start our finance and building committee meeting at 7:30 or at the conclusion of the budget hearing. So we'll move that back to 6:30. And as you can see, the timeline that Steve has set forth, with the August 5th, place a tentative budget, spreadsheet forms. August 9th would be a committee meeting here where Steve would present and discuss the tentative budget. 18th, present to the school board. We would then have the hearing on September 6th and then bring it back to the school board for approval on the 15th. So that'll be a busy couple.
So on August 5th, when the budget's put out there, I know you referred to the state's forms. Trying to remember exactly what they look like, but they're at a fairly high level. When you guys are preparing that budget, what other detail do you have? Do you have budgets that break things down by vendor, that break things apart by month, that type of thing? Are we going to be able to see that type of detail?
Well, certainly you can ask for specific detail that you would like to see. One of the things I'll put, for example, in the budget creation, I'll have all our bus leases, a pretty comprehensive spreadsheet of our bus leases, which is a lot of detail. So we'll have, and it's important because our bus leases go out in 2019, 2020 maybe, and I think we might have 7 different lease contracts over time and the payment plans. And so I have it, I've created a spreadsheet and have it by fiscal year, what's our obligations per fiscal year. So that's a level of detail. So in the budget, we'll see, we have lease payments for X amount of dollars, but I think it's important that we all know our lease obligation, not only what we're paying for, how many buses and things like that, but then what our future obligations are.
Right. So I think a lot of our expenses are fairly set in stone, so to speak. You have leases for the bus payments, we know what our bond payments are, we know utilities are, we
Contractual
know
maintenance.
what salaries are going to be. I think there's just a few categories professional services, that type of thing, where, it might benefit to get a little more detail. And I think it would really help both with the budget and the reports that we have, especially now for year end, to build some kind of narrative around it. So, put out the highlights, put out what went right, what went wrong, in your words, both positive and negative. I think that would be really very beneficial.
And I think in years past, the one that really is a hard one to figure out is the special education. Because at times you can have somebody within the district who actually have a child who needs a lot of care, and that can throw those numbers off quite a bit. That's one of the areas where we tend to see a lot of fluctuation. But you're right, I think a lot of them are.
And I think on your reports where you have kind of the percent of budget, I mean, you can go into some detail on the ones that vary significantly from the actual budget and how we're going to plan for that going forward in the next year's budget. That would be helpful.
And I think it's important when you see budget and actual, and then either this budget's closer to the actual, or you say, for instance, if the budget is the same budget as the previous year, although the actual is, I need to explain it. I need to explain why the variances. So, major variances between budgets and actuals, and this year's budget is dramatically different than last year's budget or last year's actual. I think, we need to give you all an explanation of why.
And even like in the operating reports that you're going to present, I think the education fund and the fund after that, things like, salaries were almost at budget, just a little bit lower, but benefits in that fund picked up just a little bit. Things like that, you kind of expect salaries and benefits to go down. I'm sure there's an explanation. I'm sure somebody on a family plan that wasn't on the family plan before, whatever. I think it'd be nice to see that, have some confirmation, so people aren't assuming that people aren't, looking at their reports, trying to go interpretations of what's there.
Well, I appreciate the feedback today, but again, emailing, another question.
When the budgets are being put together, how is information presented by whoever department head, manager, supervisor, teacher, representative, whatever, for continuing education that's mandatory, staff training that is not mandatory, that's just nice to have, or is that differentiated somewhere, or how do you guys handle those kind of expenses, like meeting expenses, travel expenses, all that kind of stuff? But those are, in light of the situation that our district is in, those are kind of controllable costs, the way I like to look at it. Either you just kill all of them and just do mandatory, or, I don't know what's the policy and how does it work and how's that brought forth?
Very little going on there. For instance, we have the mandated special ed training we have to do that we budget, and then the Title I funds and different flow-throughs, and Steve will tell you to work on those. We will, our assistant superintendent does get a small budget for AP conferences and some of those things that we feel we just have to go to, but it's a very marginal budget at this time. It won't exceed what was budgeted last year. In terms of department chairs, each department chair, even though their departments have gotten a little bit larger, basically the budget stayed the same. Those are for supplies, resources, those types of things. So we're working with Steve and Rich to build those right now and to do a better job building categorically, as Norman said, based upon what the note expenditure is going to be and whatever contingencies may arise.
So in other words, if you're trying to, break down and put it maybe in simple terms, just want versus need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What do we need to do and what do we want to do? And sometimes those wants and needs are not as clearly defined.
And we talked about a category 1, 2, and 3. And category 1s, you have to have them, there's no question. Category 2s are a little bit more between the 1s, and then the category 3 are the things that right now we just can't afford to have. And we're going to continue to improve and evolve our budget, especially with Rich and Steve here, and look at those types of categories and classify those 1s, 2s, and 3.
And I think this year's going to be different with the schedule, which then obviously we're looking forward and a lot more heads in the game to develop this budget, a lot more expertise to look forward to.
And professional development is tracked in separate line items. And so we'd be able to share with you what we're spending on professional development. Dr. King alluded to, I don't think it's going to be a very large number, and you'd be surprised. And it's, in schools, unfortunately, continual professional development is not as much as typically you would see in the private sector, from what I understand.
Do we have any objections to bringing a proposal on the timeline budget forward to the board? Objections?
Just one quick question on the budget itself, as we're getting ready to go into the cycle. When you start approaching a budget, say it's May, you're getting close to a line item budget. If you think you're going to go over, does that have to come back to the board? Is there a process, or are you allowed to go over budgets, I guess, without any sort of action on a particular line item?
Go ahead and answer that, Steve.
I think with I think we're going to change our process that in order to go over to spend, we have to find money. We're going to transfer, we're going to move money in that budget, and we'll hope to. One thing we don't have in our current budget is a contingency account. Typically, on a large budget, I may have a superintendent contingency account of $250,000 to cover unknown expenses, and it could be a leak in the gas lines, which I've encountered. There's $60,000 to dig and find a leak and repair the leak and get a budget for it. And so if we had a contingency account, we would move the money from the contingency account to that. So our intent moving forward is to always transfer money from someplace and not allow that to go over budget. And we'll probably do that during the year, just like we did this last year when we changed some budgets and moved somebody around. And we'll probably do it and maybe quarterly present school board how we, for approval of how we move money around to cover.
And the school board does every single meeting too, does approve all the expenditures, so, but you're right. Seeing that it
and that's an internal procedure, right? That's not state mandated. The state doesn't say if you're 10% over, you can't move things around. Like in federal grants, which I'm used to doing, they'll let you move up to 10% of your budget from one line to another. If it's more than 10%, you got to go back to your federal grant or whatever.
Well, it's the same to the state. You're allowed to move 10%.
Okay, so they do cap it at 10% of the total budget?
10% of the total budget.
Which is pretty good number.
Yeah, pretty easy.
I guess it depends what we're calling items too. We have 5 big line items versus.
that was something small.
The way it works at the county, and I actually kind of like it, is you have categories. You have your personnel costs, and then you have your purchase services, capital outlay. You can go over in one line item, and if you have additional funding in a different line of professional services versus some other kind of service, you can internally do a journal entry to correct that. Doesn't do anything. However, if you must move from personnel to capital outlay or so forth, different categories, that requires 2/3 board approval, and that usually happens on a monthly basis. In fact, what we do is if we have a capital project and it just happens to be sitting in the wrong line item, we thought it was going to come in under 20, came over, we'll actually have it go negative in that line item until the board meeting happens to do a move, so that at all times it's transparent, you can see exactly what's going on. But we take care of that on a monthly basis at the monthly board meetings, maybe a month lag depending on when the journal entry should occur. But that, I would suggest doing it on a monthly basis or as quickly as possible rather than waiting to accumulate a whole bunch of things to do on a quarterly basis. But if you're moving within your own area is in your operating fund, for example, if you're in personnel, you can choose to pay somebody $4 million if that's your budget and the other person $0. As long as that bottom line in that personnel balances, you're good to go. So we do transfers within, but not outside without 2/3.
Yeah, and the reason I was thinking that we would actually make the transfer and then go to the school board and ask for approval is because the purchase orders, many of them have to do with purchase order system.
Right.
So, and it's tough on from a management standpoint to say, all right, we're gonna let that one go over budget, and if some, we gotta, and when the purchase order system says, we just say, we can't, you have to find money, so we won't let a purchase order go through unless there's
Right.
budget. And many times, we're going back to the principal and say, you want to pay for this, you have capital, we think you got capital outlay money, so you're gonna move your capital outlay money to cover, so we're asking for, where are you gonna find the money
Right, well, we would.
in order
leave
for the
it-
purchase order to go
We
through?
would leave it coded incorrectly until that movement is done. So I'm sorry, I misspoke, we coded incorrectly, we would code a capital outlay $400,000 into, miscellaneous expenses and tag it as something that needs to be changed after board approval. So we're not messing with the vendor, because it's really not the vendor's problem that we have it in the wrong line item. So we'll pay our vendors, obviously, it's just the accounting is not done without proper approval.
Yeah, we're doing it with purchase orders as well, so before we're even committed to that vendor, we're budget checking that purchase order.
Yeah, that's what we do, yeah.
And you're required to move funds, and, I mean, we got hundreds and hundreds of them, we got people dedicated to just, how many people for the budget transfers and whatnot, but it's not the necessary evil,
Yeah, we all do.
So Steve, is that?
So, we might have covered one and two at the same time.
Yeah, exactly, we kind of touched on them, but I'll let you dive a little deeper.
Again, I really would like to say, my presentation related to financials to August. I guess the only comment is that, we did pretty well in relation to the budget. We did better than the budget. The operating deficit was projected to be 5.2, came in at 4.2. You'll, when we report a lot of information in August, you see there were some of the extraordinary, and maybe I'll allude to some of them right now, some of the extraordinary expenditures that we had that would have made our deficit less this year. So I really think, to some extent, you would call it core operating deficit might have been $3 million this year, not necessarily $4 million. One of the things we paid out over $400,000 to close out RIF people, close to 70 people for RIF. Many of the individuals, their pay was spread. They might have been 10-month individuals, and their pay was spread. Their normal contractual pay, their salary pay was spread. They were going to be paid in 4 pays and 2 pays in July, 2 pays in August. All instead of that, by law, if somebody's no longer working for it, we have to close out their pay. So they were scheduled to be paid in July and August. They got all their money in June, and that was over $400,000 in one-time payments for closeout on risk individuals, and then the extraordinary cost with refunding on drivers that it's not typical. That's what the driver said. We also made a lease payment earlier than we could have. The lease payment for buses, it was a $450,000 lease payment. It was due July 15th. Our directive was to not hold bills, pay bills. So an invoice came to us in the middle of, in the first part of June, due July 15th. We had paid another lease payment in July, so we paid two of the lease, that $450,000 that was paid twice in one fiscal year. From a business standpoint, since it was due July 15th, from cash flow, we're going to pay it anyway. We're going to pay it prior to July 15th. It would have been paid, submitted. So we submitted it to the board in June, and we paid it in June. And so that affected the transportation fund and made deficit a little bit greater than it could have been if we would have waited for that bill in July. And I'll highlight similar things like that. But I looked at it to a certain extent. I think we are running, I call it a standard. You look at our picture, maybe a $3 million deficit, and then with our savings from closing one of our schools, which truly is $5 million plus in savings, that we should, and we learned from the state that they had that stopgap, the 6-month budget, but they approved a 12-month school budget. So we know what our state funding is going to be, and I guess we can count on it.
They decided to write the check.
Unless they decided, but they proved that was the part of the deal. It's a 6-month budget for almost all of the state operations except for our schools. They got a 12-month budget, and I think we can budget accurately for state revenue this year. Because one of the caveats I had is, we're looking for a $2 million surplus this coming year, except for what goes